Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Bridge to India's webinar on Rooftop Solar for SMEs. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to introduce you to our panel for the day. We have put together a diverse panel that spans across the solar industry as well as the SME rooftop consumers. Representing today on behalf of the developers, in the rooftop space is Mr. Ravinder Singh from TATA Power Solar, one of the most recognized names in the rooftop solar business. We also have with us Mr. Ashutosh from Electronica Finance Limited, an NBFC that specializes in financing for the SME sector. We have Mr. Kushagra, who is the co-founder of SunSource Energy, a leading EPC provider. And finally, we have, representing the Inverters, Mr. Vivek Bhardwaj from GoodWe. Today, we also have two SME stakeholders who have installed solar rooftop systems and net metering, and they're here to share their experiences, the opportunities in the space, and also the challenges. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Sandeep Jain and Mr. Nangia from the Solar Group and Encoders India, respectively. I'd like to sort of walk you through today's schedule. So this is the timetable for the day. So we will have an introduction and opening remarks by Mr. Vinay Rustagi. He will set the scene and set the context for today's conversation. We will then move forward to the SME sector, our two CEOs who will be talking about their experiences. And then we will have a discussion by the panelists from the industry and an open panel discussion following that. We will have a Q&A section immediately after that, and in the Q&A section we would like to take your questions. You have a chat screen on your panel, on the right side of your panel, bottom right side of your panel. We request you to please send in your questions, and we will be taking them towards the end of the panel discussion. I request you to please address the questions to a few of to whoever the panelists are, so that we could streamline the process and make the best use of the time we have. I would like to now hand it over to Vinay. Vinay, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sangeeta. Sangeeta, if you can share the screen, please. Thank you. And a very warm afternoon to all our panelists, as well as everybody who is attending the webinar. So we already have more than 200 participants on the webinar, and I'm sure it will be a fantastic discussion. So, you know, the MSME segment has been a very curious part of the market. A lot of people have been talking about this segment. The fact is that even today, it occupies a very, very small share of the total rooftop solar market in India, and that's because it faces some unique constraints and challenges. And what we want to do on the webinar today, we want to discuss, you know, what is the true demand potential and prospects for this customer segment. What are the various factors which are expected to drive growth? Equally, what are the various bottlenecks facing this market? And then finally, what are the various business models, even technology solutions, and financing solutions for MSME customers. Sangeeta, if you roll the slide, please. MSMEs are really the bedrock of the economy, and I think that some of the numbers, if you see on the right-hand side, they are actually pretty staggering. There's a definition of MSME as per the Government of India, which is business investment up to 500 million rupees and revenues up to 2 billion rupees. So, you know, there are some pretty substantial size commercial and industrial companies which fall in this category. And as you can see in the pie charts, the MSME segment constitutes more than a third of total exports and GDP in India, and almost half of total manufacturing output and industrial power demand. I mean, those are really kind of staggering numbers, and one does not really think that MSME customers would be such a substantial part of the economy. You know, we were trying to assess what is the total MSME share of the rooftop solar market in India. and there are no reliable estimates, but we've been collecting data on rooftop solar for the last 10 years. And based on some guesswork around size of installations, split between large C&I customers and smaller size customers, we estimate that the total MSME installation base in rooftop solar as of today is about 800 megawatts. Now that is only less than 15% of the total rooftop solar market in the country. And I think really, if you see rooftop solar, the large C&I segment continues to account for a bulk of the share of the market. One could even say that it's the whole industry is running on actually one wheel, and that is obviously not desirable. And I think it is imperative that we try to find out what are the ways of unlocking the growth potential of the MSME customers. And if you look at the growth drivers, I think these are very much similar to what you see in the larger C&I space. MSME customers again pay much higher tariffs than the rest of the customer segments, including the residential and the agricultural consumers. And they stand to gain anything from 3 rupees to 7, 6, 7, or 8 rupees by adopting rooftop solar. And that seems to be the number one driver for adoption of rooftop solar systems by these customers. Now, if you offset that against the challenges that are faced by these customers, so our assessment of the market is that there are two main sets of challenges, and these challenges need to be understood particularly in the context of their MSME customer base and their financial and operational capabilities. First and foremost, the larger developers are all keen that they go after the larger C&I customers, the blue chip customers which provide scale, which have better credit ratings, and which can provide multiple installation base over the country. Now, MSME customers typically can't do that. The other financing constraint is that most such customers are, one, not able to offer any collateral to their debt funding counterparties. And second, most of the NBFCs who are active in this space are pretty expensive when it comes to debt solutions. I mean, we hear about debt financing coming at the cost of about 13 to 16 or even 18% for this customer segment, which is clearly not attractive. And most customers understandably want cheaper, more affordable debt financing. And I personally believe that low awareness is also a constraint. The larger customers are well served by the solar industry, but the smaller ones are not. And there are no, and that challenge becomes more acute because there are no standardized solutions in this industry. So every time a small customer, let's say, wants to adopt rooftop solar, they really need to understand, what is the module technology, who's going to be the supplier, where are the inverters going to come from, what is the performance and the reliability of such a system, etc. And likewise, there are multiple business models, grid connectivity policies, and I think the customers, because of their small base, because of their typically single installation requirement, they lack ability to understand many of these things, and that is preventing them from tapping into this product. What is the total potential of the market? I think there have been some studies which point out to a number of 16 to 20 gigawatts. I think even those numbers are an underestimate. Based on our total assessment of the rooftop solar market in India, and within that C&I market, we believe that the total potential in this customer segment is as high as 25 to 27 gigawatts. Now, so those are pretty substantial numbers, and clearly, if the installation base today is 800 megawatts, we're still scratching at the surface of this market, and there is a much larger piece of pie behind it. To discuss all of this and to corroborate or even deny some of the information that I've just laid out, we've got a fantastic panel. First of all, we will have Sandeep Jain and Rajesh Nangia, two preeminent MSME companies who have installed rooftop solar systems in the last few years, and I think it will be very useful and insightful to hear from them in terms of what has been their experience what was their motivation and what has been their experience and learnings when they went down this path. And then we have obviously Ravinder and Kushagra leading rooftop solar EPCs and developers. We have Ashutosh, which from EFL, a specialized NBFC catering to MSME customers. And then we have Vivek Bhardwaj from GoodWe. And GoodWe are also the sponsors of this session. So what we are going to do is we will give each speaker, each panelist about 5 to 6 minutes to share their own experience and views on the market. And then after that, we will come to a more interactive session by way of a discussion and Q&A. So to start the session, if I can just come over to you, Sandeep, and just talk us through your motivation, your journey on this path, and what kind of challenges did you face, and what is your advice to other MSME customers? Sandeep, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Vinay. Yeah, thank you, Vinay.
Thank you.
I first saw solar rooftop financial working sheet and a payback sheet in 2011. It made sense even then, with power cost being about 5 rupees per unit and solar installed cost being about 110 rupees per watt. It still took me 8 years and I installed last year. Why? To have a shade on my terrace, to reduce the heat on the top floor. At home, my bedroom is on the top floor. At work, my office is on the top floor. And in the summers of Delhi, NCR, it gets very, very hot. And it is nice to have a shade. Well, that was a joke, but that is really how I installed the system after 8 years of knowing about the benefits. A quick run through what we do in India. We produce about 375 gigawatts of power. 75% of this, that's 300 gigawatts, comes from burning fossil fuels, mainly coal. In lifetime greenhouse emissions, something that affects the climate, coal is 20 times higher than solar, which means coal is so much worse than solar. And what is only better than solar is hydel, nuclear, and wind, each of which have their own issues. There are about 30% distribution loss in coal-generated power because it comes from a distance to the user, and 30% gets lost on this. Solar rooftop is just where you are, right on top. There is zero distribution loss. As when I mentioned, potential of 20 gigawatts, 40 million SMEs in India. Even if a few of those, 10% of those install a small solar system, that 20 gigawatts can be. And today, at a cost of 50 rupees or so, installed solar, and power cost being 8 rupees per unit, I think it is better than investing in an FD. So if you have an FD, take it out of the bank. Banks are not very safe any longer, and install a solar system on your rooftop. Will pay you back better. The how. Only grid connected system makes sense. And start with how much roof, how much terrace you have. Don't start with a number. I will install a 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt, or whatever. First, see, do you have a terrace? So people who have a shed, there is an issue. In SMEs, a lot of SMEs are in sheds. You need to see how you can do it. But those at least who have a terrace and a solar PV system can be installed, they should start how much area they have. And once you have analyzed that, then you know pretty much what size of system you can install physically. Next comes the cost factor, what you can afford, but I'll come to that later. Look for reliable vendors. Plan on celebrating a silver anniversary with them. That's 25 years relationship. Those are the kind of numbers the marketing people will tell you, I guarantee for 20, 25 years. And that is how, as long as the systems work. Do not look for the cheapest. They may not last that long. Look for reliable and future-ready friendly technology. You have to live with it for quite a period of time. Study and ask around from people who have installed. Like this webinar also is a very good way of disseminating information. Do not purely depend on the marketing talk of the salesperson who visits you and offers you the lowest. Look for a cloud-based monitoring system. You see, what happens is you install a system, you're excited in the first few weeks, months, and then it kind of goes out of sight, out of mind. But if you have on your phone or on your laptop an app or something that shows you daily data, that would excite you. I produce so much for free today. You know, it gives you a boost. My personal experience. In my personal case, I chose Made in India Renewables Mono PERC 372-watt panel. Now, for those who do not understand, this may be jargon, but I'm just sharing. 372-watt mono crystalline panel, and that is good, future ready. There are older technologies also, and I'm sure today there are even newer and better panels. I installed a micro inverter system, not a string inverter. Simple reason, safety. In string inverters, multiple panels are joined in series, and there is very high DC voltages which go to the inverter, and therefore a wire carries very high DC voltage, as high as 400 or 500 volts. DC is very dangerous, especially if you have people going on the roof. In my case, even my pets go on to the roof at home, and I have help staying there. In my office, there are other utilities which are on the roof, and people will keep going. I would not allow DC being floated around. Also, micro inverter which is installed below a panel is a modular system. There need not be a very nice array sort of a thing. You can have, wherever you have space, you can install few here, few there, few there. So you can make better use of the space that is available. Also, this technology allows you to monitor each panel in your system. Other systems allow maybe in groups, in strings. But here, there is a microinverter connected to each panel, and you can actually monitor. If one panel is dirty, you can see there is an image that will show you on your phone or your laptop that this particular panel is dirty and maybe therefore not producing efficiently.
Sorry, Sandeep, can I just quickly intervene? Can you just, because I'm slightly conscious of the time, if you can now just talk us through very quickly, what are the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome? Yeah. For example, was financing a challenge for you? How did you finance the system?
So like I said, you invested in FD and we worked out the cost and it was better than an FD and we had some cash in reserve. So might as well invest in a solar photovoltaic. Challenges, I think, is first to decide on the system, size, technology, find the right vendors. And there is always a little challenge when you interface with the government. I did not have the challenge in connecting to the grid in Delhi, but I did have a challenge in Gurgaon, that is DHBVN. It took them 6 months to install the net metering and start the grid connectivity process. Other than that, no challenge.
Okay, and is the system working well as of today? How old is the system now?
Exactly 1 year. Both two systems. I installed 8 kV at home and 15 at my plant.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for that, Sandeep. So we will come back to you later in the session. Thank you for that. And I will now come to you, Rajesh. And if you can share your own experiences, anything in particular where you may have a different point of view over Sandeep, and just share your learnings and advice with other companies.
Yeah, definitely. Very impressive and very informative session given by Mr. Sandeep. I fully agree to what he said. I'm Rajesh Nangia. It's a proprietorship concern. I'm from Encoders India. We manufacture rotary encoders. and we are into this business since last 25 years. I graduated as electronic engineer from the YMCA Institute of Engineering, Faridabad, and then started my own business. Well, in 2011, I was heading MSME of India, a very big association, as you may all know, integrated association for micro, small, and medium enterprises of India. So there I was heading this solar assistance to our members. There we did a pilot project. We installed 2 kilowatt of solar power with batteries. Basically, we wanted to replace inverters because those days power was going too frequently. And say your shift is, our shift was finishing at around 5:30. So we were sitting there designing our own thing and doing work on computer. And for us, we are two brothers, 62.5 kVA DG set was running because most of the time power was not there because of local breakdowns or for scheduled power cuts. So we were consuming almost 400 rupees an hour of worth of diesel, besides the headache of running the DG set. So we thought of installing this solar inverter with batteries. So on 11 units, industrial units, in their office block, we installed 2 kilowatt solar inverter with batteries. And that time we spent a hefty amount of 5,30,000 for 2 kilowatt only. And that comes out to be 265 rupees per watt. That was phenomenal. But still we were satisfied that every time, every evening when the power goes, there is a scheduled power cut, we are saving around 400 rupees an hour. But it was my passion, but it literally failed after 3 years because of the battery cost. After 3 years, when the battery went off, it demanded a expense of 1 lakh rupees, which makes it totally unviable. And then we made a representation at Claridge's Hotel to the then CM, Mr. Hooda of Haryana, about the solar awareness. So his PA scribbled down something, and I assumed he has not noticed. But before he came out of power, by the end of 2013, he made the rule that that was my submission, that any building, wherever it exists, whether it be residential, industrial, commercial, or institutional, it should be having a solar rooftop. And with that submission, probably he made it compulsory to have solar rooftop in every industry. Well, he has made a cap of 50 kilowatt and above. Still, the growth because of this rule is phenomenal. And I'm quite satisfied that I was a bit instrumental in making this awareness. Now, after so many years, when that was scrapped, just last year, we made a new factory at IMT Faridabad, and there we installed 36 kilowatt power of solar. Well, I would recommend everyone not to go in for a cheaper version, as Mr. Sandeep said, because whatever electronics you buy today, you expect a life expectancy of 5 years. Leave apart these mobiles and all that, which last only for 2 years. But this solar system is not a product of 2 years or 5 years. It is product of around 20 to 25 years as per their design. So you should be having a channel partner who should be installing this. He should be thorough and stable into this field. Not a mushroom growth person who is one day in forging, other time after 2 years he is into fabrication, then he jumped into solar. Maybe after 2-3 years he will find some more profitable business and he will switch over to that. So we should be choosing our channel partner which is stable into his business, and you should be able to give a service year after year. And as Mr. Sandeep said, we should be celebrating silver jubilee with him of our solar system. Well, the latest data I captured just now, we installed this in September 2019, and so far we have generated 36,000 units kVAh of solar with 36 kilowatt. And this comes out to be, if I calculate for April alone, 5097 units with 36 kilowatt of installed power, which comes out to be 4.719 units per day per kilowatt. And this time we invested not with batteries, it is grid connected, grid synchronized system, which is the most efficient and maintenance free, totally maintenance free. And the peak power we generated was around 204 kilowatt hour with 36 kilowatt system installed, which comes out to be this is per day, 5.66 units per day per kilowatt. Well, our generation might be a little less because we took care of our aesthetics of the factory also. We have got 2 motorcycle sheds. On those sheds, we have got different slopes. May not be towards the south, but we are having slope towards the east and the west also. But total with 98 panels, we are generating 36 kilowatts. And again, monopark we have used, and quite satisfied with that. And
so Rajesh, just very quickly, again, we need to wrap up this session. What is the main challenge you faced in the installation or the subsequent operation of the plant?
See, again, the bigger mistake we did this time was having a longer string of solar panels. We are having string of 14 solar panels in series. So if any one of the solar panel in those 14 strings gets a shadow on that, the whole thing stops generating and you lose power basically.
Okay.
So the micro inverters, as Mr. Sandeep suggested, that is the real answer to this. So every solar panel will be having a micro inverter below it, and then there is a combiner box. And my daughter, she's in New York. They just installed it about a few months back. 17 kilowatt system. Our 36 kilowatt was installed in something like 45 days. And that is too long a period. 45 days they took for installation, but in US, for 17 kilowatt, they took not more than 2 days. One day they came 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. they were finished. And they clearly mentioned that tomorrow at 2 o'clock we'll be starting the generation. And yes, by 1 p.m. next day, the generation started and everything was okay. Whatever committed is they are generating.
Sure, Rajesh. No, that's very interesting, and I think it's good to hear how Indian market compares with the West also. So we'll come back to you later. The very interesting experience. I will now go over to Ravinder, and Ravinder, Tata Power, of course, is one of the biggest installers and developers in the rooftop solar space. You cover the entire market, right from residential onto large C&I. So if you can just talk us through in terms of what is your assessment of the MSME segment? How do the needs of the MSME customers vary from other client segments, and how are you looking at this addressing this market from a technical and operational perspective? Ravinder, we can't hear you. I'm not able to hear Ravinder.
No, we can't.
I'm unmuted now. I think it was muted.
Okay.
I was muted at your end. Like you rightly said, Vinay, I think the MSME segment is the bedrock of the economy. In fact, any economy. All right. And traditionally, Tata Power has focused on building up its presence on the ground across the country. And traditionally also historically last 2-3 years, around 20% of our business comes from MSMEs. Okay, so we have a fair bit of experience in meeting their needs and other things, but I feel that we only scratched the surface. And the biggest problem so far has been that many a times, the financing is a challenge. I think both Rajesh and Sandeep are talking about relatively small size systems, but there are many SMEs which need a larger system. Okay, and that's what our experience is. Less than 50 kilowatt systems, most SMEs are able to afford the investment. Okay, it's only when you start going into the larger sizes that the investment becomes a challenge. Typically, if you are in the 100 kilowatt range, give or take, 50, 70 kilowatts here and there, that's the time when the investment becomes a challenge, because SMEs simply don't have those lines of credits which are typically available to a large corporate. They don't have. And what they in fact look for is they look for a totally bundled solution which includes financing. And by the way, financing should not require them to collateralize their assets. In many cases, the assets are already collateralized to the bankers. So, so financing, one of the reasons why we've been able to scratch the surface and we've been working very hard to find a solution for the MSME segment is that the only financing which you have available for them is through the traditional banking channels. And you have NBFCs which are offering financing, but that financing is typically available in, I would say, early to mid-teens. Okay, or rather, I should say middle to high teens. And then that dilutes the economic value proposition to a great extent for these MSMEs. The second thing which is also there is a certain lack of awareness. I think both Rajesh and Sandeep live in a metro, so the awareness levels are high. But that is typically not the case if you go into the hinterlands. And that has in fact changed. So it's a moving thing. What we now find is increasingly that the awareness levels 2 years ago was not there, but now it's there. But then mostly they do not want to make investment or are reluctant or unable to make the investments on their own. They would typically like a financing kind of a solution. So I think we are also underpenetrated in this segment, and the reason why we are underpenetrated is that we are not able to offer the right kind of financing solutions. To my mind, that is a big barrier to a certain extent. Lack of awareness, which I said earlier, is going away as solar is becoming more omnipresent, if I can use that word. So I think those are the two things which are actually holding back the penetration of into this segment. But then, having said that, there are many segments in the MSME where the growth is there. So we find that the cold storages, for example, there's a high degree of awareness. There is subsidy which is available. The automotive sector also, there's a high degree of awareness, and and probably that's being driven by the auto OEMs, and that's why the awareness is there. But then the general purpose industrial units, there is a certain lack of awareness. And while Tata Power has the presence on the ground to make them aware, and we run campaigns in industrial areas to educate the people, we are also working on finding a solution. But I think one thing which is holding back the growth in this segment is the lack of financing options. Ideally, as an industry, I think we should be able to provide a solution to MSMEs, which is no different than buying power from a utility. Why should they invest in something, where when they typically get power from a utility, right? And if the industry, I think industry has to really work on finding a solution to this, and together with people like Electronica Finance and others. I'm very keen to hear Ashutosh's views in this regard. But I think that's probably the key to unlocking the potential.
Thank you, Ravinder. I will come to Ashutosh, but before that, let's hear from Kushagra. Kushagra, first of all, do you agree with most of the discussion so far in terms of the market potential the financing and the awareness challenges? And then how are you and to what extent are you addressing this market and covering this market? And what are you doing unique for this segment? Kushagra, over to you.
First of all, yes, thank you, Vinay. Yeah, really appreciate it. So I was finally able to make it despite the heavy rains here in Delhi. So I think the first things first, I do agree with all the panelists which were before me. In terms of the market is really tough to crack, especially if we have to bring financing in, because that's where we will be able to scale up the market, right? And the challenge is the MSMEs, either they are not rated or the rating them itself is a challenge. And then the working with the NBFCs, because there are very few specialized NBFCs which are operating in today's environment who can focus on financing solar. And the ones which are, their interest rates are on the higher side. So we are trying to test out few of these, and what we're finding is once we go out with the NBFC type of solution to our MSME partners, we find that the interest rates which we are offering through NBFC solutions are becoming on a much higher side, especially where the interest rates are on the other side, getting on the lower side. So there is a big mismatch both in terms of who can provide the specialized financing on the NBFC side, and then who can, their interest rate seems higher, because obviously so, because they're still testing out the market, they're still testing out the product rollout. So those are the bigger challenges. But I agree with the previous panelists that the market, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities, is much more higher, and that's where the MSMEs are mostly situated. It's not even though there is a big chunk of MSMEs which are present across metro cities across India, but that's where the bigger impact is in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So if you're able to bring in financing along with solar, the market has a potential to scale up. And what at our end, what we are trying to do is we definitely focus on at SunSource. We surely focus on commercial, industrial, both as a capex and opex provider. But we are in the process of testing out a few rollouts with MSMEs, and it's really a tough nut to crack. No easy solution. But I think there are a lot of brains and a lot of now NBFCs are coming in and all trying to put their solutions together. So hopefully, as a collaborative approach in the industry, we are able to solve that and scale up the potential what is out there. Vinay, not able to hear.
Yeah. Let me just ask you a quick question. I mean, I think one of the most pleasing things that both Rajesh and Sandeep mentioned is that they're not very price sensitive. They're equally focused on quality. Now, I've seen many of the larger EPCs and the developers focus mainly on the larger C&I customers because of scalability and because of easy access, and ignore the MSME segment because the installation sizes are smaller. And many of these customers are far too cost conscious. So it is the local small installers who seem to have the winning edge. Do you see that as well? And to what extent do you think MSME customers are important for your business, and you are kind of pushing and trying to make a customer specific strategy for this segment?
See, for us, every customer is important because it comes along with the relationship. And our investors include State Bank of India, and they have a record of over 100 years being present in the country. So relationships are what they are, and that's where you basically go to client number 2, client number 3, right? And your reputation is as good as your last project at the end of the day, right? So, but at the same time, it's a really tough market because it's a segregated market, it's a spread out market. Whereas in the CNI, if you focus on, your single project is few hundred kilowatts to a megawatt, or maybe 5-10 megawatts. Those sizes we are doing now, a couple of projects which behind the meter 10 megawatt as well. But coming back to MSMEs, so we are seeing, if we look at different, and we have done some internal analysis. The typical MSME project we are seeing is in the range of 50 kilowatt to maybe 250 kilowatt. That's the range we are seeing. But then as we start, either they don't want to deploy the capital, or they don't have sufficient understanding where they feel comfortable deploying the capital on their own, right? So, but there are a few outliers, including Mr. Jain and Nangia here, who have deployed their capital, right? And they have taken the role here as an industry leader. But if you look at it from a majority perspective, there is people want the solutions provider to take that role, at least for some time. So that's where the market is segregated, and the smaller players are not able to bring in the financing. And the idea what we are trying to solve for is if a collaborative, if we can help qualify the smaller players, and then same time work with different NBFCs, because then NBFCs are not comfortable working with sometimes with the smaller players because of the sheer scale, or maybe some quality concerns or few other aspects. So maybe there is a way to bridge that gap, to basically bridge that gap together. But our idea is we are focusing on few clusters, and then we are going deep into those clusters and trying to scale it up from there. Because otherwise, if we focus on too many clusters, it becomes very difficult to focus and get the results out. Because we think there are early days.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Kushagra. I'll come to you, Ashutosh. I think the floor is open to you. Everybody is saying that financing is one of the most important pieces of the jigsaw. And I do believe that, Electronica, with its expertise in this segment, can really open the, unlock one of the main challenges facing this market. So if you can just talk us through what is the outline of the financing solution that you're offering in terms of the key terms and conditions, cost of capital, etc., and what has been the uptake in the market based on what you've seen so far.
Thanks a lot, Vinay, and I'm very happy to be a part of such an impressive panel. Thanks again for including me in the panel, and thanks to all the earlier speakers, especially Ravinder and Kushagra, for I think leading it to a financing sort of a platform. But I agree with both these gentlemen, and I'll just take 2 minutes quickly to talk about the company. And how we got into solar financing, and some of the challenges that these two gentlemen spoke about, how we are trying to tackle them. We are a 30-year-old NBFC now, exclusively focused on the MSME segment. Our core business so far has been machine financing, or maybe industrial equipment, if you so may want to term it that way. We are financing machines in a variety of industries: metal cutting, metal forming, plastic, printing, textile. We are a pan-India.
Sorry, Ashutosh, what is the average ticket size of your financing?
Yeah, so the average ticket size on the machine financing side is around 35 lakhs. And as far as rooftop solar financing is concerned, while we are only 7 to 8 months old in this industry, the average ticket size here is close to 20 to 25 lakhs. But as I was mentioning, we are a pan-India NBFC focused on MSMEs, registered with the RBI. Of course, we have a long partnership with SIDBI to provide financing solutions for machine acquisition. In our 3-decade-old journey, we realized 4 or 5 challenges which the MSME themselves have in terms of getting financing, right? So I 100% agree. It's still a major challenge. After 3 decades, also things really haven't changed, unfortunately, as far as access to finance is concerned. But there are a few challenges, and I'll tell you how we try and tackle it. One is, of course, overall external ratings. That's a challenge for many MSMEs. Second is in terms of the. Sorry, I missed something which is come. Yeah, some poll thing screen came up to me. Sorry. Second is in terms of the time taken for a financing solution to be given. Third is, of course, the elephant in the room is collateral, because there is an issue in terms of the rating, in terms of the financial creditworthiness, so to speak. Everybody needs a collateral. And fourth is in terms of a paper-driven sanctioning process that most financial institutions and banks follow in the country today. Everything has to be on the balance sheet, and there are segments in the country, there are MSMEs in the country who are doing well, but for whatever reason, not everything is on the balance sheet in that sense, right? So we try to tackle all these four aspects. So today, so to speak, we have a credit decisioning tab, so sanctioning happens within 7 days. What we try and do is not rely on ratings, right? We do have our own ratings, which are purely customized for a MSME kind of a enterprise, which takes into consideration the financials, the off-balance sheet items, the business profile, the overall person or the people behind this particular industry. We also take care of things like who the customer, who the MSME is relying on, who are the MSME's customers. So we take into consideration all these things, give equal weightage as far as the financials are also concerned, and then try and provide a solution. Now, one thing as far as the collateral is concerned, when it comes to machine financing, we have been able to crack the code, so to speak, right? For typical machines that we finance, we do not take any collateral for loans up to close to even 2 crores. Okay. But when it comes to rooftop solar, we have a bit of a challenge. So I'll just take 2 minutes to talk about what are the product features that we have for rooftop solar. So here we start our funding right from 10 lakhs to going up to 1 crores. So basically 20 kilowatts going up to maybe 300 kilowatts of kind of installations. Up to 20 lakhs, which is maybe roughly 50 kilowatts thereabouts, we do a collateral-free funding at this point in time, right? So no collateral is required. Of course, there are certain strings attached to it, but otherwise, if those conditions are met, no collateral is taken up to a 50 kilowatt kind of installation. We have up to 5 years of repayment period, which we are offering. Of course, apart from the traditional manufacturing MSMEs, we are also trying to figure out how we can fund hospitals, schools, colleges, service-oriented industries for rooftop solar finance, which we traditionally haven't been doing so far. The rate of interest.
Ashutosh, what is the cost of financing, and what percentage of the system cost do you finance typically?
Yeah. So we fund around 75% of the, in certain cases 70% of the total system cost, which includes panels, inverters, the cost of installation. So the entire project cost, so to say. And the rate of interest varies between 11% to 14% for the MSME, depends on the financial profile and overall rating that the MSME has. Actually, one thing about the collateral, we would love, and we are trying to work towards finding a solution to provide up to 50 lakh rupees of loan without any collateral. But why we are not able to do it, and why we have been able to do it in our traditional machine financing, is in terms of not understanding the quality of installations which are there. Now, why we are able to do it in a machine financing setup, in the event of a default, let's say the customer defaults, the MSME defaults, we can quickly repossess the machine, sell it off in a second-hand market, and recover our money back. And with whatever we've done, close to 30-35 loans so far, and I think by the end of this month we should be clocking 50 loans. What we've realized is that we're not able to figure out if in an event of a default, can we repossess that installation? Can we sell it in the market? Is there a second-hand market at all? And I think that's where the challenge for us as an NBFC lies, because all the other aspects which typically traditional financiers face is something that we have we like to believe that we have tackled, except for this collateral bit as far as the rooftop solar finance is concerned.
Sure, Ashutosh. Okay, thanks very much for that. I think that's very, very interesting, and I'm sure many people have been jotting down everything that you've said, and the phone lines will stop ringing, will start ringing very soon after this call, this webinar. So I will come to you, Vivek. Now, GoodWe is of course one of the leading inverter companies in the rooftop solar market in India. But typically, GoodWe and other inverter companies, they work mostly with installers and developers. So I just wanted to understand, one, to what extent are you developing any business strategy specific to the MSME segment? And second, I think Sandeep and Rajesh, highlighted their concerns around safety and performance of the systems. So if you can just give your perspective, how you are, how your equipment, for example, is designed to address these concerns, and what are the kind of new features of new products that are coming out. It will be interesting for everybody to hear. Vivek, we can't hear you.
Now perhaps you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yeah, so just to give you a very quick background about GoodWe. GoodWe is a multi-gigawatt sized inverter as well as solar battery manufacturer based out from China. This is a great time to have this webinar, because on the 2nd of September we will be launching our own IPO in Shanghai Stock Exchange, which is indeed a very big news for us. And this is going to give us the much needed cash, perhaps to expand to twice or thrice of the capacity. So these are great times for us to be launching an IPO and to get some valuation for the market capitalization that we have done. At the same time, we are indeed sincerely indebted to partners like Tata, who have worked with us for the last several years for supply of solar inverters for various segments in India. As per us, the SMS, the small and medium industry is approximately 1 gigawatts of potential per year, which is very close to the 800 megawatts of potential that you have given us. But then I think it is very important to find what is the cutoff. So as per our estimates, the small and medium enterprises starts from 20 kilowatt, and it can go to a maximum of around 300 kilowatt. This is the power requirements of a small and medium industries in India. And for this, obviously we have several inverters which are already into this category from 20, 36, 50, 60, 80, 100, 120. But I think that itself is not important about the inverters, and I think this is an information that is there for a lot of people. But typically from our side, we have seen that the main reason why small and medium industries were investing in solar was depreciation. For the last many years, the government was allowing 80% depreciation. I don't know what is the current value, but they were allowing the depreciation of 80% for the first year of the investment, whether it was a DG or basically it had to do something with the increase of capital. And gradually this depreciation of capital has now evolved into three main categories as far as power needs of small and medium companies involved. The first one is pure solar, where some small and medium company will put a solar inverter, and it will just talk to the grid, and it will give you electricity. The second category that we see emerging very, very fast in India is the DG abatement system. By the DG abatement system, we clearly see that people want to use solar panels and inverters along with DGs. So there are many cases where people had a 64 kilowatt or 65 kilowatt DG, but suddenly wanted to increase the power requirements. So what do you do of the additional 30 kilowatt? I mean, do I just dump my own DG and buy a new DG? But obviously, no, there are solutions available where you can give the balance power through solar, which is how you can use the DG beautifully in conjugation with the solar panels. And this is a big market which has happened. I mean, some challenges are what to do with multiple DGs, because one DG is a much more simpler animal to tackle. But I think these solutions have been perfected by reputed companies like Tata. But I think if you ask us, this is history. because really the segment that we see emerging is the panels plus storage segment. And indeed, there is probably nothing which can stop panels plus storage from coming in, where you completely let go of the DG, and now all your power needs are satisfied through the panel plus storage. A lot of discussion is happening around two main things, whether it is lithium ion or lead acid. But clearly, I mean, if the psychology in India is reducing costs, then they will go to lead acid battery. But if it is to benefit with the number of cycles, it is to do with the lithium ion batteries, which have almost 15,000 cycles for the lifetime. In fact, yesterday I was talking to a vanadium battery manufacturer, which is also which is a competition of the lithium ion battery, which is much bigger in size. For example, a 40 kilowatt vanadium battery will be 3 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter. Okay, and it has a life of almost 20 years. You just need to change the pump for every 10 years. So this is what is happening in the battery segment. I think finally, I think we see three main challenges in this segment as GoodWe. The first one is servicing. So if there is a downtime, how fast can we service the MSME people? Will it be 1 day, 3 days, 4 days? Okay, can we do some initial analysis through online? And yes, the answer is yes. There are many systems where you don't need to go to the site, but within the first 4 hours, at least you can go to the online website and find out what the fault is. So as you can understand, the most crucial part of this whole system is not technology, it is not solar panels, it is not EPC, it is not financing. But the main thing is how to service a 50 kilowatt system who is somewhere in 50 kilometers from Bhopal. How to go to this person within 2 to 3 days, because this is the biggest challenge in service. And we have more. You will have at least 5 to 10 times the size of a service team compared to a sales team in a typical inverter company. The second problem that we see is actually chaos. And what do we mean by chaos? In medium and small scale industries, we see there is too much knowledge. There is too much knowledge of consultants, of going to Google, of asking someone who has done an engineering, and the biggest thing is how to manage this chaos. And the easiest way to do that is to go to reputed companies like Tata, who already have smart people employed, who can understand the system, designing, push vendors, who can do EPC contracts. And I think this is the most easiest thing, because, we don't expect a 50 kilowatt a person who is so busy in his job to start, getting into technology and understanding what is MPPT and voltage range and higher voltage and monoperc. I think it will be totally chaos. I think it will take him several years to make even a simple decision. And I think the final.
The safety concern raised by both in terms of the DC current.
Yeah. So what is the question, Vinay? Yeah.
My question was, are you able to address the safety concern which has been raised by Rajesh, for example? They were talking about typical DC inverters not being very safe on rooftop installations. Is that really such a big issue? I mean, how do you kind of counter that?
Muted.
Yeah. So I hope you can hear me, but I think I think protection of AC and DC circuits is a science in itself, and you are absolutely right. At least gone are the days when people used to be scared of a solar system. But some things which quickly come to my mind are SPDs. For example, how do you protect yourself against lightning? Do you use a type 1, type 2 or type 3 SPDs? IP65 or 67, I mean, how do you house the inverters? Okay, what if there is rain continuously for 3 days? Okay, then your basic design, for example, DC fuses. Now one gentleman told he has used monoperc, but now the voltages and currents are increasing drastically for high-end panels. How do you protect your inverter for all these things? So, these are all complicated questions, and protection is obviously a key feature. But from our side, we discuss very actively to customers like Tata on how to protect the customer and his installation, and together GoodWe comes up with specific solutions for the Indian market. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think.
Thanks, Vivek.
Thanks, Vivek. Okay, thanks.
So I just quickly ask. Sorry, yeah. Rajesh and Sandeep. Sorry, can everybody mute themselves?
Yes,
Yeah.
Vivek.
Sorry, this question is for Rajesh and Sandeep. Have you been happy with the performance of the plants that were installed in the last 1 year? Or have there been any performance failures or any kind of dissatisfaction with the equipment supplier or with the installer? If just very quickly, if you can both answer that question. Rajesh, to you first and then Sandeep.
You're not able to hear?
No, sorry, we're not able to hear you.
You are able to hear me now?
By the organizer.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, as I said, satisfied with the installation. The only thing I mentioned was to have micro inverters so that the whole string does not go. If
Can't hear.
telling your customer that get benefit of the accelerated depreciation, that is 40% in first year, 40% in next year, and 20% in the third year. That is the best advantage.
All right. Okay.
Because normally you might be seeing that in March end, they are going in for buying a car if they don't want it, but just to balance their balance sheet, they want a car. They want to invest somewhere to get depreciation. So solar is the best investment for getting depreciation. 40% is phenomenal in first year.
All right, thank you. Sandeep, any performance related issues from your side?
No. We are monitoring every day, quite satisfied. But for rooftop, I would suggest don't spoil your roofs. Just don't install them on the roof directly. Elevate them. Have a tin shed, PPGI sheets or galvanized sheets, and install your solar panels on the roof so that you have got some additional space. Future expansion would be there. Within no time, you will be space and you can utilize that space.
Sure. Okay. I just wanted to quickly ask Sandeep, have you faced any performance related issues with your plants?
No, so like I said, I went in with microinverters and they are relatively much easier since the connections are simpler and they install under each panel. I have had no issues at all. And regarding the safety, it was not Rajesh. It was I who mentioned about the safety issues of string inverter. And as Rajesh ji mentioned, he has 14 in a string, which means something like 700 volts DC. I would be extremely scared, and I'm an engineer of 30 years experience, and I do understand my science and technology. And 700 volts DC, I would not like on my roof.
Fine, thank you so much for that. Now, Ravinder and Kushagra, I hope you're still there. What I wanted to ask you was, so far we still see a very bipolar business model. Either there is the RESCO solution, or now we're talking about debt financing by NBFCs, including Electronica Finance. Aren't there any hybrid business models being explored by yourselves or any of your other competitors, which basically combine the various, good aspects of the RESCO model with some aspects of debt financing or an EMI model, and try and offer the customer some kind of a composite solution, based on some short-term financing element?
So, Vinay, yeah, this is Kushagra. We still haven't. I would say we still are in the. We are still in the early stages of scaling up solar for MSMEs. And since there are only few providers and we're still testing out these different markets in terms of financing from different fronts, from our side, we are looking at financing from a leasing or through NBFC route, because PPS becomes very tough to get the MSMEs, especially if they don't have the credit rating intact to finance. But any product mix in terms of we providing some sort of an equity support or providing a mix of PPA plus leasing, we still haven't figured out yet. But what we have been able to do is work ourselves with few NBFCs and get us qualified to start rolling out their pilot products to help the NBFCs, to help the MSMEs get financed and ultimately deploy the solar product or solar projects, which eventually they probably would not have. So I would say we still have a long way to go, and a lot of new products will roll out. But I think we'll need support of a lot of NBFCs in this sector, because eventually, if we can finance a simple cell phone, so I'm sure we will be able to finance these solar projects.
Okay, Vinay, I think I alluded to that. I think the whole rooftop solar industry is guilty of not innovating enough for the MSME segment. Having said that,
Yeah.
I see green shoots of innovation taking place in the MSME segment. I do not want to name a couple of companies, but a couple of companies have come out with very innovative business models for MSME financing. And these companies have been in place for the last 1 or 2 years. They initially grew up as regional players, but now are quickly acquiring a pan-India footprint. I think that's happening. As regards, so far, the only innovation we've really seen in the rooftop industry is the OPEX model, which is now 5 to 7 years old. And quite frankly, beginning to lose its luster. Okay. Yeah. Because, if you really have to, and that's one of the reasons I feel that the rooftop industry has not grown to its potential, both in the residential and SME domain. I think, like I said earlier, when I was making my opening remarks, financing is the key to unlock. And right now, having a pure vanilla, either CapEx or an OPEX model is not going to work. Okay. You would need some kind of a subscription model. Okay. Which basically, is probably a hybrid of the CapEx and the OPEX solution. You would, given the nature of the MSME industry, I don't think so you can offer financing for a tenure longer than 5 or 7 years. But within that 5 to 7 years, if somebody can offer some kind of a subscription-based model, which is not non-collateralized at a competitive interest rate, maybe single digit, or ideally maybe early double digits, okay, and somebody can do it and from approval to disbursement within a fortnight, I think that's a winner. And we've been talking to some people, but that's the holy grail we are looking for. And because we have the presence on the ground to reach out to all of these SMEs, but we are not able to make a breakthrough because we don't have the overall package. You cannot go to him only with a technical solution. Okay, you have to go to him with a kind of a financing plus technical solution, plus also have a package that for the entire duration of financing, we give him some kind of a performance related comfort. Okay, so that he is not out of pocket. Because typically that is the concern which most MSME owners have, that he should not be out of pocket if he installs the system. So yes, I think there is very little innovation which has happened so far for the MSME segment, but I see some green shoots, and I can say that without divulging the details, Tata Power is actively looking at some of those options.
Okay, thanks, Ravinder. Ashutosh mentioned a very interesting point that they are exploring collateral-free loans so long as they can solve this puzzle of how to repossess assets from defaulting borrowers. Now, does anybody else want to have a go at that? Ravinder, Kushagra, or even Vivek? What is your thought process on that?
Okay, that's a very, very conventional mindset, Vinay. Okay, I started in the rooftop industry in 2013. And I remember I went to HDFC Bank and said that, why don't you finance the rooftop project? He says, आप कितने पे खरीदोगे अगर customer default करेगा? Okay, so I'm sorry, Ashutosh, but that's a very, very old mindset. And that's one of the reasons why the penetration of the rooftop in the MSME segment is not there, because if an NBFC also starts thinking as the way a conventional lender would think, it's a challenge. Okay, and
Can I come in here?
Yes, Ashutosh, of course, can.
Yeah. No, so point well taken, Ravinder. And as I also mentioned, we are trying to work in a non-conventional way to figure out the solution to this code. But when we talked about repossession and resale, what we're trying to say is that just for example, take a car financing industry, right? Why is it able to work so well? Because there is ample liquidity in terms of a second-hand market available, and most financiers will of course think on those lines. So, I think the challenge is not so much about the EPC taking back the installation or helping them out, helping the financer out. The challenge is in terms of having standard qualities across rooftop solar installations, where and of course a second-hand market where those standard quality installations can be sold if at all there is an issue. And as a financer, at least today, and we are just about a year old in this industry now, and we are moving very fast in trying to figure out how to provide solutions, because we are cognizant of the challenge, right? And we are cognizant of the fact that MSMEs might not be able to give collateral. As I mentioned, we've been able to crack the code as far as machine financing is concerned, and this is the next challenge that we are picking up. But in terms of quality, in terms of a second-hand market, in terms of a standard categorized kind of a matrix where this panel will produce so much of electricity.
Ashutosh, if I can just interrupt, I understand the perspective, but the fact of the matter is, unlike a car, yes, you are right. Why the financing for rooftop is not there is because there's a very established second-hand market in the car. Once a lender lends to it, he knows very well कि यार 3 साल के बाद क्या value होगी. But the challenge with rooftop solar is, okay, first of all, the prices solar systems have been falling. Okay, that's a reality, that's a fact of life. So nobody can predict that what is the price which is going to be prevailing at that point of time. That's number one. But I think a far bigger challenge is that once you have to remove the rooftop solar asset from somebody's roof, there is value destruction which happens. Okay, the value destruction to the extent of 30 to 40% happens. Okay, and that's where the challenge is. Okay, see, because other than the panels and the inverters, pretty much everything else you cannot use. Okay.
Absolutely.
And so then you're talking about roughly around 40 or 50% of the value of the asset getting eroded the moment you take away from somebody's roof. So that's been one of the challenges. Okay, I'm not saying that it's a low-hanging fruit in terms of providing solutions, but those challenges have been known for the last 5 to 7 years.
And not to forget the very significant decommissioning and the recommissioning costs again, Ravinder.
Yes. Yeah, I was saying that's why I said value destruction. So to take away an old plant and install the new plant, you're talking about another 40 to 50% of the cost. That's what I meant by value destruction. That's exactly what I meant by value destruction.
So what is the solution then? How do you offer a collateral-free loan? Which, I think there is a consensus that financing needs to be unlocked, and it needs to be collateralized financing. So how do the financiers get comfort over the safety of their financial asset. Ashutosh, what is the other alternative regimes that you are thinking about?
So far, we've been picking our brains internally and trying to figure out what best can be done. But we, as I mentioned earlier, we are very cognizant of the fact that if this limitation is there, even in our product, it is going to be a challenge. We will do this, but we, as all everybody in the panel mentioned, we'll just scratch the surface, and that's not what we are here for. Right? We are thinking of a couple of things which I might not be able to share at this point in time, where we are actively, brainstorming internally, thinking about the collateral challenges. How do we tackle, this challenge which Ravinder also mentioned, to try and see that if we can at least fund up to 50 lakh rupees collateral fee. I think we try to, we get a solution for that. Then I think the whole, it will be a game changer in the sense that a whole lot of MSMEs will come under the ambit of financing. And I think 50 lakhs is almost 100 kilowatt plus 125 kilowatt kind of capacities that we're talking about, which most MSMEs typically would not cross that kind of capacities. Most, I'm generalizing, but most. So there are a couple of things which we're talking. I've been talking to a few people as to how they can help us, technical consultants, and let's see. I mean, these are early days, just about a year for us also in this industry. So as we mature,
Sure, thanks for that.
Yeah, Vinay, if I. Yeah.
Yes, Vivek, I wanted to come to you. If please feel free to add your comments. But I also wanted to ask you if you can talk about the rapid change of technology in terms of both panels and inverters, and then you obviously talked about storage that is going on in this market, and how costs are coming down, but even the performance of the systems is improving, the safety aspects are improving. So if you can just touch upon some of these things very quickly, that would be, I think, useful for many people on the webinar.
Yeah. Vinay, I think we can't see you, but I hope you can hear me. The others can hear me. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think I think these are just I think two separate questions, and even though GoodWe is an inverter supplier to prominent EPC companies, but we have some take on both these points. The first one is that the value of the asset is not really such a unknown target. Okay, and whether it is after 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, we know very well what is the degradation of the solar panel. We also know what is the degradation of the inverter. We also know what sort of depreciations and risks can happen around cables. So with some uncertainty, it is quite possible to find out the value of my asset after 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or even 10 years. Inverters can give extended warranty till 25 years. Solar panels are already there till 25 years. So it is not an impossible task to find out what is the asset of what is the value of my asset after 10 years or 11 years. That is the first point. The second point is that the way GoodWe after an IPO is envisaging this whole scenario is slightly different. We neither expect the small and medium industries to be tackled by OPEX model, neither we expect them to be tackled by the CAPEX model, because for MSMEs, you are a buyer of power. Okay, so the way we envisage the future is quite drastic, and this is already happening in Europe through several terms that you must have heard about, like microgrids, smart grids, where a person like Sandeep ji or Rajesh ji do not need to worry about spending money on power. There will be a power producer. We already have big companies, except now they will start focusing on MSMEs and using a and using like there's a stock market, there will be a similar market for power, in which you can choose from multiple sources of power. They may be wind, solar, storage, nuclear, it does not matter. Okay, but based on your demand, it will be coming to a centralized place where it will be matched through different sources of power. And in that, thermal, nuclear, all of these systems will play a very crucial aspect, which is why a company like GoodWe is investing very highly in a SEMS portal, where we anticipate that the future of the inverter is not just to talk to solar panels or batteries, it is also to talk to multiple sources of power like wind and etc. etc. And ultimately, you are the consumer, and they will aggregate all your requirements and then match it with the supply side. So the future of solar, and believe me, this will all be made much more easy when 5G comes, where each of your loads, each of your factories can be linked directly through a IoT or a 5G network to a demand plan, to a demand software, which will match it to the source. So this is the second part. And finally, in terms of efficiencies, I think inverter efficiencies are already at the peak time high. There is nothing you can do beyond that. We are already at 99% efficiencies. And for panels, I think the main thing is panels, because panels have increased from 19% to 20% to 24%. So there is a much more scope in panels.
Thank you, Vivek. Vivek, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah, thanks. So I think we are running out of time. So we've got quite a few questions. And I see that bulk of the questions are around, movements in the policy framework. So many people are concerned that the net metering policies are changing, and many states, particularly, for example, UP and some of the others, have withdrawn net metering benefit for CNI customers. And the question is, how do customers then adjust against that, and how do they overcome this constraint in the market? I think Ravinder, you and Kushagra are best placed to take this question. I mean, how are you? What are you advising your clients? Yes, Sandeep, we'll come to you also as part of this. And has that really kind of led to a slowdown in the market, or are customers and you able to overcome this through alternative plant design and sizing, etc.?
Ravinder ji, are you going ahead, or shall I go ahead? Okay, let me go ahead. So this is Kushagra. So I think, Vinay, this is a very, very good question. In fact, what has happened in UP and few other states where overnight the net metering policies were changed into gross metering, it has also led to technology innovation. I would say that, and a lot of the clients who were looking from a perspective of net metering being there, they gave a pause, and we were also caught on a back foot that how we should be now addressing the market, because the customer is there, and how do we address the market? So what we are doing fundamentally is now taking a close look at their consumption data pattern, how much they're actually consuming on a 24/7 basis across 365 days, and then devising a project based on that. And the other calculation which we are doing is so that and putting it definitely a reverse power relay, so that we don't have to export out any electrons which are being generated, which are not consumed towards the grid. That's number one. In certain cases, we are also looking at solar plus storage solution, where the TOD time of day usage patterns are there, or differential pricing is there. Studying the pattern much more closely and looking at some storage plus solar solution to ensure we store at a time when the tariffs are lower, and then inject back into their system behind the meter when the tariffs are higher. So I would say the cost differential is much higher between what the grid is offering and what end consumer can eventually benefit by using solar. And eventually, basically, their end product pricing is becoming much more competitive, and which is leading them to either better PAT or more better pricing to their end consumer. So we're seeing I think we're addressing more from a technology perspective and also ensuring that even the regulatory challenges are there, but once we are looking at more from an engineering and financial perspective, I think the solutions are starting to now come out.
Ravinder, do you want to add to that? Ravinder, you are muted, I think. No, we still can't hear you, Ravinder. Ravinder, we can't hear you.
No, I think it's just that I'm muted by your team somehow. Oh, you know, it's been happening now for every time I'm about to speak. For some reason, I'm muted. I don't know why this is happening. Okay, but yes, I basically agree with what Kushagra is saying. Okay, that's exactly what we do right now. The immediate short-term solution is, optimizing the size of the plant. Okay, whereas earlier, if net metering was there, you were to size the plant based on the maximum load which was there. Okay, now you size the plant based on the minimum holiday load. Okay, so that's what you're doing. The second step right now, and like Kushagra again rightly pointed out, is that you use the battery. And currently, with the way the battery prices are, it makes sense that you size the battery in a form and manner that it acts as a reservoir for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. The current battery pricing says do not lend themselves for having a larger size, so you just basically use as a battery as a reservoir for maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour. Okay, beyond that, I think the economics don't make sense, but that's the immediate this thing. Apart from the average size of the plant becoming smaller, I don't see any other impact which has really happened in the market demand. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravinder. Sandeep, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so just a couple of points, and I would just, I represent Federation of Indian SMEs. I think the average size that has been talked about for SME of being 50 is a little too high for the S. Maybe so for the medium, certainly not for the S. And now, as the discussion is going towards the smaller in size, so with just about 5% of my connected load being from solar, I realized that I have not exported anything in 1 year, very minimal, and which was, as Ravinder mentioned, it was the Sunday, and we work a few Sundays also, so we consume on Sunday. So even if net metering is not available from the discount, I think we can start small, which is also what an SME would absorb easier. Start with a small system, something that, even if net metering is not available, will work for them. And also for a small, of the SME, let us look at what is really the terrace price that is available. So, 500 square yard plot, 1000 square yard plot, building from them, what kind of size do you really expect to install the system? So I think 50 for me, as I understand industry, is a little too high. Up to 20 is what we should look at. It's not so expensive and probably consumed within the company.
Okay, thanks, Sandeep. We are out of time now, so I just want to quickly summarize. I think the technology landscape is changing. The cost of the equipment is coming down. I think we finally also have some innovation happening on the financing side. There is a general consensus that the level of awareness in the SME space is improving. So I think there's lots of reasons for us to be optimistic that this market is going to take off and finally going to realize the potential. There are, of course, solutions to be found out. Net metering is becoming more challenging. Collateral-free financing is still a little bit of a problem. So, more work needs to happen. But I think there are multiple reasons for us to be optimistic, and I think that's a great note to end the webinar. So, thank you so much. All the panelists, including Vivek and GoodWe, who sponsored the webinar. And thank you also very much to everybody who's been present on the webinar. I will just pass on the session to Sangeeta, my colleague, who will just close it out formally and issue any other closing remarks. Thank you. Sangeeta, over to you.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, Vinay.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinay. And thank you all the panelists for being a part of this webinar and making this a fascinating discussion. Before we wind up, we also want to extend a special word of thanks to FISME, Federation of Indian Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, who were a strategic partner and through whom the message from the webinar has reached the right audience, the SME sector. We will be sharing the recording of this today's session, and it will reach your registered email account, and which will also be available online on our website at www.bridge2india.com. Please write to us in case of any more queries, and we'll make sure it reaches the right panelist. Once again, thank you all for joining, and have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay and Sangeeta. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.